what you're doing in the session that can impact cognitive function. And you want to be aware of those things. So this is credit to Dr. Sarah McKay from the Neuroscience Academy. I just finished her program, and if you want to learn more about neuroscience, it is amazing. And so she kind of creates this model and shows there's an outside-in, top-down, and bottom-up approach to influencing the brain. So if we look at outside-in, there's things that are like social support, stress, life events, education, environment. There's top-down effects like thoughts, cognition, emotions, feelings, mindset, beliefs. And then there's the bottom up. There's genes, hormones, immune system function, nutrition, exercise, and sleep. And you see down there in the bottom up category in the bottom right, I've circled exercise because that's the one thing we're focusing on today. We could have several presentations, certifications, courses on each of these subdomains of these outside in, top down, and bottom up categories. And usually when I talk about brain health, people think top down. They think thoughts, cognition, emotions, feelings, mindset. But bottom up is really what we're empowered to work with as health professionals, because we're dealing with the body. We're talking about nutrition. If you're more in the health coaching realm, you might talk about sleep and optimizing your immune system function, your hormone function. All of that stuff influences the brain. And so I like to use this model as a way of assessing or intaking clients, where I really ask, what are the positives, sorry, there's my verbal fluency, positives and negatives in each of these three areas? And what do you think you're doing really well for brain function? And if we took away something like, good growth mindset, how would that affect you? Well, it'd probably affect you negatively. But if you have feelings of anxiety, we might want to bring in a cognitive behavioral therapist. So we look at the positives and negatives in each of these areas. And like I said today, we're looking at the positives and negatives of exercise. So we're going to have a quick review on your brain on exercise. And there's so many benefits, and we're going to try to review kind of the high level benefits of exercise. What happens is norepinephrine is released, improving attention, perception, and motivation. Endorphins are released, dulling the sensation of pain, but also helping with other psychological functions. Serotonin is released, enhancing mood. Blood flow to the brain increases, delivering more oxygen and nutrients while improving waste removal. Dopamine is released, improving motivation, focus, and learning. The hippocampus, a part of the brain concerned with learning and memory, grows in size with regular exercise over time. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, also referred to as BDNF, is released, protecting and repairing neurons from injury and degeneration, huge. And then hormones combine with BDNF to grow brain cells, regulate mood, and provide mental clarity. And we're going to get into the fact that different types of exercise and different acute variable tweaks will do different things to hormones, different things to these neurochemical and structural effects. But we can just stop right here and appreciate how freaking cool exercise is for the brain. If I told you you could take a pill to do all these things, you'd be like, I would pay tons of money for that. And I don't think we stop and realize and appreciate what exercise really does for the central nervous system and cognition. So it really is amazing. Let's just talk about aerobic exercise, because that's one of the best, most well-studied aspects of exercise and its effects on executive function on the brain. Aerobic exercise, and we can borrow from different mechanisms of this into other aspects of exercise. So it's not just aerobic exercise, but we'll focus on what the research says now. Aerobic exercise benefits includes enriching the brain environment. There's neurogenesis, which is the creation of new neurons. Angiogenesis, the creation of new blood cells. Synaptic protein expression, which allows the building blocks that build parts of the brain to be expressed. Nutrients, and also BDNF, we reviewed that earlier. And we'll go into the neurotransmitters, serotonin. Serotonin, as you can see on this chart, I'm not going to go into levels like what does low serotonin or high serotonin levels do, because that's a bit more complex. But on the positive end, we see relaxation. Negative end, we see insomnia. On the positive end, we see pleasure. On the negative end, we see anxiety. On the positive end, we see learning and memory. On the negative end, we see disability or aspects of dementia, and we'll get into that. If we look at dopamine, it regulates things like alertness. On the positive end, it can have clarity. On the negative end, ambiguity. Motivation on the positive end, or being hyper on the negative end. Positive on this end with working memory, negative on being passive, or more like a spacey type of vegetable state. And then we look at norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is typically responsible for concentration. On the positive end of balancing that, you have certainty. On the negative end, you have doubt. On the positive end, we can have determination. On the negative end, obsession. On the positive end, we have recall and memory. And on the negative end, we have dementia or dementia-like symptoms. And I want to say dementia-like symptoms because sometimes For example, women with menopause can experience dementia-like symptoms and get scared that it is dementia. So we'll just say dementia-like symptoms until we know for sure with that individual. Now, what's really cool is the interaction between all of these neurotransmitters. So if we see that optimal dopamine and norepinephrine relationships and levels work together, it creates good attention. Dopamine and serotonin together, good appetite. Norepinephrine and serotonin together, endurance, and all together creates balanced mood. And so there's this very complex but fascinating interrelationship between neurotransmitters and exercise. And I'm going to dive into this future in my own journey of studying this stuff. But if we can understand how to target this, we can really help people, not just with the cognitive, but with the psychological. So I find this very inspiring.
Now, Ryan, when you're talking about kind of on the positive end, on the negative end, positive end, are you just saying optimal levels of these, and negative end might be too much or too little? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. So I don't even think I have the expertise just yet to really say what are optimal levels. And I don't even think we can get into what types of exercise provide these, but we could look at the basic mechanisms where if one exercise is providing too much of one, or certain nutrients that you're intaking are providing too much of one, that could go a lot of different directions. But we're looking at just this principle of optimal levels and balance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sounds good?
Yep.
Great. So this is one of my favorite slides, the multimodal effects of exercise, meaning what do different types of exercise do? And I just want to say all of this evidence isn't concrete, but this is going off of what's being able to start being shown, especially in animal models, of what different types of exercise do to the brain. So we'll start with resistance training. We just overviewed aerobic training and all of its different effects. So we got pretty deep into that. But resistance training does have a positive effect on executive function and does increase synaptic protein expression more potentially than aerobic exercise. And it can usually affect the area of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for complex thinking, reasoning, multitasking, and problem solving. But so can aerobic exercise. So let's not be exclusive here. We're just kind of parsing out what might be the differences. And then mindful movement, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga. Tai Chi is one of my favorites. And I know we just had Diane Bailey on recently. Stuff is awesome. And with mindful movement, it comes with regulation of the two areas, the frontal lobe insula and the amygdala, integrating thoughts and emotion. We talked about metacognition earlier in the amygdala. We hear about that, the fight or flight response. High intensity interval training, also effective for improving executive function, usually controls the area hypothalamus, responsible for appetite regulation, cravings, and addictions. Really big if you struggle with older clients or aging clients with menopause. The fitter you are, the more you can regulate temperature. It's also great for homeostatic function. And it doesn't mean that high intensity interval training only does that. Of course, it integrates aspects of resistance training, cool down, which might include mindful movement. It might include aerobic exercise. So just again, I just want to help differentiate that there might be a more complex interaction here. Things like sports drills and motor learning might address the basal ganglia with attention, switching between tasks and inhibition, a lot of coordination there. If we start to integrate the eyes a little bit more, working with saccades and working with different targets and task-based exercise and three-dimensionally looking at your environment while you're three-dimensionally and functionally moving, we might affect the parietal lobe, which is responsible for visual spatial processing, huge for fall prevention. Looking at coordination exercises, things that require complex coordination, might address the cerebellum, which also has effects on attention and executive function. And aerobic exercise, which we reviewed, which we know grows the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning and memory. So this isn't the best way to explain it, and it's not definite. It's just to give you an idea of how these different types of approaches and modalities might affect different areas of the brain, as well as specific cognitive function. And so if we find that there's people that struggle with Parkinson's and we know it has to do with the basal ganglia, we might integrate stuff on the right-hand side, coordination, visual drills, motor learning drills, to really address the area theoretically. And if you look at a lot of Parkinson's rehabilitation, it incorporates just that. And so this is a good idea for us to say, as research starts to come out, we get a better idea of what different types of exercises do. The future is really exciting, because if we can get imaging or quantification on what people are struggling with, or if we know what subjective interpretation relates to certain areas of the brain, we have a lot of power in how we can help our clients and ourselves. Cody, you got anything on that?
No, I mean, I love a lot of the well, it's new and old evidence is coming out related to some of these areas, like when you're talking about, coordination as a specific approach to really stimulate the brain. And, some of the research that I've reviewed, obviously you've done a lot more of it, are looking at those specific kind of modalities that have been shown to improve different aspects of executive function, such as Tai Chi and dance and sports training. These are all pretty well documented, but I think we're still trying to figure out exactly what they do, exactly how to use them, I guess, specifically for different clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I get really excited about this. Some might call it precision medicine style thinking, where it's no longer enough for us to just say exercise, especially if you're already exercising. The next step we can say is get more variability, but it would be great if we could be very, very specific in what we're doing. And that gets me excited to be a health and fitness professional, because then we can really translate that into practice. Okay. So the cognitive stimulation hypothesis. So we've gone into the beneficial effects of exercise, different types of exercise, but what would happen if we stimulated cognitive functions during exercise? And we're going to get into different styles of doing this, but my favorite is combining cognitive stimulus and challenges with physical stimulus at the same time. So the researchers Tomporowski, Best, and Pesce have really proposed this hypothesis. So it's the research isn't as thick as the aerobic exercise effects on brain structure and function. However, there is research starting to come out on this thing called the cognitive stimulation hypothesis. And it says that coordinatedly, I think that's a word, and cognitively demanding activities positively impact executive functions more than just aerobic exercise, although both greatly improve executive functions. So where I do want to go is this curiosity as what we can do if we understand more. Where I don't want to go is say one is better than the other. I would hate for people to do just this and stop doing aerobic exercise only to find out a variety and a combination is the best. And so we're not trying to go there, but we're trying to say this is very interesting, because if we can tweak the cognitive stimulus, we might be able to get a more potent, powerful, and precise effect. The three components of cognitive stimulation during exercise, that's part of this hypothesis. There's three big words here, well, two big words rather: contextual interference, mental control, and discovery. And we'll dive into what more of these mean, but in the research, they describe contextual interference as some level of unpredictability. We might call that variability or novelty. For mental control, there's a sense of goal-directed attention. Maybe you're garnering their attention on a task or a goal. They're placing their focus on something specific. But this is just pointing to they're not mindless. And not that everyone's mindless when they're exercising, but they don't have a specific mental control, but sometimes they do. If it's the sets, the reps, the tempo, that's still cognitive stimulus. We're not throwing that out the window, but we're saying specific cognitive stimulus to those domains we highlighted earlier might be more important for this. And then for discovery, which is self-organization, creativity, and dare I say it, play. Huge on play. And as technical as all this might sound, at the end of the day, when you start to integrate these cognitive stimuli in your exercises and you're really connecting with your client, it's just freaking fun. There's a lot of smiles, there's a lot of play, and that's both psychologically, cognitively, and physically therapeutic, as we all know.
Yeah,
so the research by Dr. Stuart Brown, Mr. Jepson, I mean, I love that stuff.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt you, but I just did a session with Brett Klicka, who does the Spider Fit Kids, and
I love it.
at the Idea PT events, and it was on cognition through the lifespan. And the reason that we presented together, he does kids and I do older adults, is because there is so much overlap between between how you're going to develop your brain as a kid and how you're going to keep it developed and growing as an older adult. And I think you nailed it. One of the key aspects is really play, and the variability and unpredictability of play, I think, is just awesome.
Yeah, another person doing some great work in addition to Brett is Milo Bryant, who developed TPI's junior programs, and he just started something called CLAY, the Coalition for Lifelong Activity in Youth. And we were talking about different exercises and games. I'm like, Milo, I use these with my adults. And he was blown away by that. And I think we can learn a lot from the stuff we're doing with kids, cognition across the lifespan. But you know what? We're meant to play. We're still animals and we're meant to play. But it gets exciting when we say we can target specific types of play, or use play and what currently is not play to enhance the cognitive effect.
Mm-hmm.
So how would we combine cognitive and physical training? Let's start on the right-hand side here. If you can see my mouse, I'm starting on a thing called cognitive cross-training. And what cognitive cross-training is in the research is they do some sort of very basic aerobic exercise, riding on a bike, a treadmill, then going to a brain game like Lumosity and playing that and going back and forth and maybe doing some different cognitive stimulation like reading or learning or drawing or something like that. So you're almost setting up cognitive circuits. It's not completely active, but it uses exercise as a way to enhance cognitive benefits from other things that have been assumed to give cognitive benefits as well. Brain games, Cody, as you know, are becoming a little less than valid, but they are showing that maybe combining them might be somewhat more beneficial. Then there's simultaneous cognitive physical training, which is exactly what we're talking about today and what we're focusing on. Then there's exercise primed cognitive training, where you get into a physiological state through movement or exercise before playing the game or before giving a speech or before doing something learning oriented, which has been shown to have positive effects in schools. And then general physical activity and exercise. Don't forget, just staying active throughout the lifespan is the way to be cognitively specific. Once you have done that, you've got the basics, the common sense is now common practice, then we get specific with simultaneous cognitive physical training. But I just want to emphasize, as long as you stay active, that's a great way to keep your cognition at healthy functioning levels. So if we're looking at specifically cognitive or simultaneous cognitive physical training, what do we need? On the cognitive side, we need a purposeful and specific stimulus and goal-directed attention. We talked about that back here. We have goal-directed attention, that mental control, that unpredictability. And then we have purposeful and specific stimulus. And Cody, this is the point you hit on, which is, can we target things? Can we target subdomains? And the answer is yes. But it's also got to have a purpose. And then not to say if play didn't have a particular purpose, it can still be beneficial. But organically, we want to come with a purpose. And then on the exercise side, we usually want functional movement and novelty and variability. While there are benefits to linear training, we do want a lot of novelty and variability. We're meant to move functionally. We're meant to move in 3 planes of motion. And so that should be considered while we're incorporating these things.